Well, I have to confess this has been a wonderful study. Surprisingly for me, I did not expect that the study of the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz would be so rich. Those of you who have gone to the classes, those of you who've had the discussion group after the service, have seen what great questions these Four Agreements bring into our minds. And I know that they'll continue. In my mind, I know they'll continue in some of yours, like, wow, I just need to let this sink in. When I read the book, which is short and sweet, I thought, I don't know if I can say enough to fill up 20 minutes on a Sunday. How ridiculous was that? This is so rich. And many people in the classes said, I read this 20 years ago, and I bought it for my friend, and I bought it again, and I bought it again. I gave it away and gave it away. And they said, I wonder if they ever read it. This is the kind of book that you will let sit on your shelf until you're ready for. If you have heard of a little bit of what we've talked about this past 4 weeks, and you haven't bought it yet, I encourage you to buy it and let it perhaps sit on your nightstand instead of on the shelf. Just read a little bit and let it sink in. Let it sink in. There's some resistance, and there's some confusion, and that's good because, well, we're waking up. The whole world is waking up, and some of these Four Agreements help us to realize the dream we've been dreaming and how we can wake up from that dream. So we talked about the first one, be impeccable with your word, 3 weeks ago. And that's a tall order. Say only what you mean. Speak with integrity. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or gossip against others. And basically it's saying use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. That in itself is something to assimilate for the rest of your life. Our words come out so quickly. Without thinking, we'll say something and wish we could take it back, and we know we can't. So it's important for us to think, am I saying this in truth and love? And several of you enjoyed the THINK that I gave you. Before you speak, think, THINK. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And then we went on to the second and third, and they helped us understand the first even more. Don't take anything personally. That's a big one. Nothing others do is because of you. What others do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. I gave the example, their own movie. When you are immune to the opinions or actions of others, you won't be a victim of needless suffering. We talked about the movie. We all have a movie. We are the star of our own movie. And all the people, all the characters in our lives are co-actors. And we talked, I explained that we're in this movie theater, we're watching our own movie. Then we go to the next theater, and it's our mother's movie. We're in the movie, but she's the star. And she sees us differently than we see ourselves in our movie. Your mother sees your father differently than you saw your father in your movie. Your mother sees your spouse differently than you see your spouse. And then you go to the next theater, and it's your spouse's movie. Whoa. How does she perceive you, your mother, your father, all, on and on and on. Everybody's in their own movie. That's the dream. And what they do is a projection of how they see you. They might not see you the same way you see you. So realize that their behavior isn't really about you, because it's about their dream of you. Or maybe it's not about you at all. And so the freeing thing about this is to stop taking it as if it is about you. They're playing out their movie. If you feel offended by their behavior or words, remember this. It's probably not meant to offend you. They're just playing out their movie. It's a big insight to remember and think about. Several of you have had fun with this movie idea and, laughing together saying, she's in her movie. It is so helpful to remember. What they do isn't against me. All right? The third one, don't make assumptions. We make assumptions all the time. We've made assumptions since we were little. When we were told, don't do something, we didn't always get the answer as to why, so we pieced it together with our intellects. We made an assumption as to why. So he says, how do we not make assumptions? Find the courage to ask questions and express what you really want. If you're not sure why someone's doing something, ask them. Don't assume, because you're probably guessing wrong. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. And with this one agreement, you can transform your life. Wow. Remembering that they are in their own movie, you can't assume why they're doing what they're doing. If you assume, you're assuming from your movie. And when you make assumptions, you are probably taking it personally. Now, putting those two together, when you really remember not to take things personally and not to make assumptions, you can go back to the first one and realize, if I remember those two, maybe my words can be said with more integrity. I won't jump to the conclusion and say, you did this to me, So your words can be more carefully chosen. But all of this takes awareness. And many of us in our groups on Tuesday and Wednesday, when we had 2 full hours to talk about each one of these, many people said, this is just overwhelming. I don't know how I can just do this. I'm so habituated into doing these things. How can I change that? The first step is awareness. And that's what this month may have given you, is some awareness and self-awareness, some self-love also. The fourth agreement is going to help us with that. Always do your best. Now, hold on to that thought. If you grew up in traditional Christianity, you might know one of the phrases of the Bible is, be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Well, that's a tall order, isn't it? It's so hard, it's so impossible that people have said, well, that's just the metaphysical translation of that is, be complete as your Father in heaven is complete. Okay, well, I can kind of stretch around that idea that I realize my true self is complete, can stretch and stretch in order to understand that statement. Be ye perfect. I think that a statement like that has caused a lot of suffering and drama in the history of Christianity. And suffering and drama is exactly what Don Miguel wants us to learn to let go of. So he's saying, always do your best. And he's so kind about it. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to well, right? Sick, healthy or sick. Your best is going to change. And then he says, under any circumstances, simply do your best, and you will avoid self-judgments, self-abuse, and regret. Okay, let's just let that sink in. This chapter is filled with a lot of ideas, and what I wanted to point out is just those very 4 words, always do your best. First of all, he says your best, not the other guy's best. So stop the comparing. Remember, you're not going to assume, you're not going to take things personally, just do your best. And then he reminds us that your best will change as you change. As you have physical health challenges, your best might be different than when you're feeling on top of the world physically. Or when you're having relationship issues, when someone else who's important to you has brought you some sadness, your best will be different than when everything's fine. Your best will be different if you're in a job that you love versus a job that is not a good fit for you. So what he's asking us to do is to live in the present moment and to do our best. Our best, not perfection. That is so freeing to me. It's so freeing to do my best. And I can ask myself, am I doing my best right here and right now? Throughout my day, throughout my week, am I doing my best? And if I am, I don't have to deal with regret. And if I am not, I can say, well, what can I do? How can I do this better? How can I do this better? Best and better, it's really relative. And he doesn't really define what that means, because that's for you to understand. And he says, simply do your best, no more, no less. So if you try to do more than your best, you're going to run into perfectionism, overdoing, and you'll get exhausted. And who are you trying to please anyway? You're trying to please your own well-being. This assumption or this agreement is all about self-love. He says that so many times. If you do your best, you can be at peace with yourself. Self-love. If you don't do your best, you'll have regret. He says it doesn't matter if you're sick and tired. If you always do your best, there's no way you can judge yourself. He talks a lot about the judge and the victim in this book. The judge is that voice in your head that says, wah, 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 you're not doing it good enough. You're not enough. You're not enough, right? And the victim is saying, but I couldn't do any better, you know. Always doing your best can quiet those voices. The judge doesn't have much to say if the judge saw that you did your best at that time. The other thing about this phrase is doing, not just being. Not just being. Very often we say in a spiritual practice, just be. Just be. It's not about the doing. And yet this agreement talks about doing. He has a story that I want to share with you. Getting to it. There was a man who wanted to transcend his suffering. So he went to a Buddhist temple to find a master to help him. He went to the master and asked, "Master, if I meditate 4 hours a day, how long will it take me to transcend?" And the master looked at him and said, "If you meditate 4 hours a day, perhaps you will transcend in 10 years. Thinking he could do better, the man said, "Oh, master, what if I meditated 8 hours a day? How long will it take me to transcend?" The master looked at him and said, "If you meditate 8 hours a day, perhaps it will take you 20 years to transcend." "But why will it take me longer if I meditate more?" the man said. The master replied, "You are not here to sacrifice your joy or your life. You are here to live and be happy and to love. If you can do your best in 2 hours of meditation, but you spend 8 hours instead, you'll only grow tired, miss the point, and you won't enjoy your life. Do your best, and perhaps you will learn that no matter how long you meditate, you can love, live, and be happy." He says, God is life, And God is life in action. He says, do your best, not just be. Be engaged with your life. And in whatever you do it well. Do it the best you can do at that time. He says, you were born to be happy. You were born with the right to love and live and enjoy life. Wow. That is so freeing. That is so refreshing. You were born to be happy, to love life, to live life, and to be engaged in life. And then he says, whatever life takes away from you, let it go. If you try to hold on to what has been taken from you, you're living in the past. Whatever life takes away from you, let it go. It only causes suffering to try to hold on to it. See how many great nuggets there are in this chapter? And then he talks about work, which is really appropriate for Labor Day, I'd say. Great coincidence. He says, don't do your best just when someone is watching. Or when you're getting paid for it. You know, some of us can do our best, do really well at our jobs, and not get any kind of raise. You don't get rewarded for doing your best when you're on a pay scale that's set by the state, for example, right? If you're in a nonprofit, you probably won't get paid for being excellent at your work. And that's where I worked in all of my life. I never worked in a business where if I got paid, I'd get better commissions. So I know what it's like to do my best and not, or what I thought was my best, and not get any better pay for it. There's times where you get so tired, you say, what's the difference? Other people just show up. They're playing solitaire during their breaks on the computer while I'm working on lesson plans. Why am I working so hard? Yeah, I see social workers nodding. I see other people nodding. Mm-hmm. So, and it's the kind of thing where you think, well, why should I bother? Because I knew if I didn't, I wouldn't feel proud of myself. There's an inner satisfaction that goes on. And that's really what he's saying. When no one's watching, still do your best. Your reward, therefore, is your own satisfaction, your joy and happiness in life. The pleasure that comes. In fact, some people who only work for a paycheck will go on the weekend and waste their time trying to relax, perhaps by getting drunk. So where are they getting their satisfaction? They're only working to get paid, and then on the weekend when they have their own time, they're not doing their best. They're living in this dream of unhappiness, sucking their energy out of them. So he says, if you're going to do your best, you're going to live life intensely. You can count on that. You're going to be productive, and you're going to be good to yourself, because you will be giving to your family and to your community and everything. And that's not exhausting, because it's so satisfying. It is the action that it is going to make you feel intensely happy, not because you're expecting a reward. I think about this with volunteering in a community like this too. When I, having been a school teacher, everybody assumed that I would be a great youth ed leader. But I was with those kids all Monday through Friday, my own kids. I couldn't do it on Sunday. I knew I could, but my heart couldn't. And so I had to accept that I couldn't do my best then and assert to others who assumed I could that that wasn't my job. And I found a job that I could do that made me happy, and it was so much better. So no matter what you think your talents are, when you want to give to a group like this, an organization, Go into your heart and say, what will make me happy to do it? What will feed my juices? What will help me to be the best radiant being I can? And step into that. Okay? So think about that. Never give unless it makes you happy, because that's what we're here for, to be happy and joyful and complete and full. Now, some of you in the classes said, this is just overwhelming, I can't do this. It's just, I can't not make assumptions. I can't not take things personally. I'm just so used to it. This is what I've been taught for all these years, and I'm too old to change. Well, the thing is, this doesn't expect perfection. This is a practice. It's a practice. And people who are good at things continue to practice all the time. You think about a doctor is in a practice, and they've gone to school for almost a decade to learn their expertise, and yet they still call it a practice because they're always learning, always stretching, always perfecting skills. And that's what we call the spiritual journey, a spiritual practice. If we were expecting perfection, we might just all ascend. So we're here to practice. And you're not going to be good at something right away when you try a new skill. And you try it every day a little bit more, and you get better at it very quickly. So let this be a practice. Doing your best will look better as you practice. And he talks about the judge with this practice thing. He says, when you do your best, you don't give the judge the opportunity to find you guilty or blame you. Practicing will help you to let that judge become silent, this judge in your head. He also says, if you fall, do not judge. Do not give your judge the satisfaction of turning you into a victim. No, do not be so tough with yourself. Stand up and make the agreement again. So today I made an assumption, and it got me in trouble in my head. Most of this stuff is all in your head, the drama. So I made an assumption. I caught myself doing it. I can say, well, I'll try again in the next hour, or I'll try again tomorrow. One day at a time. How many of you have broken habits by using that theme? One day at a time. Addictions, all the 12-step addiction programs are all about one day at a time. And at first, it's 1 hour at a time. So if you have that strong of an addiction to a substance, can't you imagine you could have that strong of an addiction to a habitual thinking? Of course. So be gentle with yourself and say 1 hour at a time. Can I get through this next hour without taking anything personally? Let's be realistic. That could be challenging. Now, if you live alone and you stay alone, it might not be hard. Everything's personal. So be gentle with yourself. Use that sense of humor that you're feeling and allow it to be the beginning of a new dream, the new dream of the new earth, where everyone can talk. We talked a lot in our group about, well, you've got to have an agreement with the other person that they'll behave like this too. Well, because, a lot of people are emotionally immature, and they're not going to play this game of not taking anything personally or not making assumptions. And in a way, that's true. In a way, it is. So what I did in the beginning of this whole series, and why I chose this book, is to say, what kind of family do we want to create here in this church community? We call this a family. And a lot of us came from families that weren't very healthy. They were dysfunctional. We want to take and create a family, but we do not want to bring the dysfunctional habits into it. We want to create a healthy family. So in this community, can we make these agreements? Can we make the agreement to not take things personally? Can we make an agreement to not assume, but to ask clarifying questions? Can we make an agreement to choose our words to be impeccable, without fault? And can we make the agreement to just accept ourselves, to love ourselves as we do our best to uphold these? I think we can. And I think it's what we can do as a small microcosm of community, as an example of how we can vision the whole world to be. 1 hour, 1 day, 1 step at a time. So that is what I'm asking. When I have another quote, if you'll look at the next one, something to think about. When we have perfection expectations, we can really screw ourselves up. So when is something perfect? When I don't judge it to be imperfect anymore. And when will I be perfect? When I don't judge myself anymore. The judge is an active part of our minds, and so is that victim. And this is the journey of self-love. You can quiet the judge by allowing yourself to be loved by yourself. Facebook always comes through for me. Yesterday, one of my friends on Facebook put this quote from Socrates. I never would have found this without Facebook. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Focus your energy on building the new heaven and the new earth. So today is the beginning of that. And I invite you to take that journey with me. This study will never be finished. And I guarantee you, I'll be quoting Don Miguel again and again as I go through the months ahead, because there's amazing truth in this series of stories and examples. So enjoy the journey, and I ask you to take that challenge. Will you be able to say yes to these 4 agreements? We'll talk about that again in the next hour during the adult discussion. So thank you. Namaste.